There are ancient traditions, rules passed down for generations, not just as superstition, but as warnings. Warnings that something waits beneath the water, something that stirs when the season of Lent begins. Fishermen in small villages whisper of it. Strange catches, shadows under the waves, things pulled up in their nets that should have never seen the light of day. Some ignore the warnings, and some never return. These are their stories. Story 1, The Thing in the Net. Javier had been fishing since he was a boy. His father and grandfather before him had made their living on the sea, and like them, he didn't believe in old wives' tales. The sea gives and the sea takes, his grandfather used to say, but it was just water, nothing more. That year, Lent had arrived with strange whispers in his village. Fishermen claimed their nets were coming up empty, as if the ocean itself refused to give. Others swore they had seen something massive moving beneath their boats, bigger than any fish, but never surfacing. Javier didn't care. He had a family to feed, and he wasn't about to let ghost stories keep him from his work. So on the first Friday of Lent, he set out before dawn. The sky was still dark, the ocean a vast, endless black. He cast his nets, the rhythmic sound of the waves soothing him as he waited. Then, a pull, not a small tug. Something heavy, something that made his boat groan under the strain. Excitement surged through him. It had to be a big catch. He began pulling it in, muscles burning with effort. The net rose slowly, revealing flashes of silver. Fish. Dozens of them. Then, something else. Something wrong. A shape among the fish. At first, he thought it was seaweed, tangled in the net, but as more of it surfaced, his stomach turned. It was hair, long, black, and moving with the current, as if it were still alive. Javier's breath caught in his throat. He pulled harder, and that's when he saw it. A face, pale, bloated, eyes open and staring. A mouth slightly parted, as if it had been about to whisper a warning. The thing was tangled in his net, its fingers twisted in the ropes, as if it had been reaching for something. Then it moved, not a wave, not the current. It twitched. Javier let go. The net, his entire catch, sank back into the water with a sickening slowness, vanishing into the dark depths below. For a long moment, he sat frozen, his boat rocking gently. Then, a hand, breaking the surface just once, waving. Javier never fished during Lent again. Some nights, though, when the wind is still, he swears he can hear something knocking against the hull of his boat. Waiting. Story 2, The Hooked One. There are certain things fishermen know not to touch. Certain catches that should never be pulled from the water. Luis learned this the hard way. He had been fishing for years, always setting out just before dusk, casting his line into the river that ran past his village. It was peaceful work, the kind of solitude he enjoyed. But when Lent arrived, the river changed. The water, usually clear, darkened. The fish were scarce, their usual movements sluggish, almost unnatural. Some of the older fishermen refused to go near the water, muttering prayers under their breath. Not during Lent, they warned. Something else stirs in the river this time of year. Luis ignored them. Superstitions didn't fill empty stomachs. So one evening, as the sky turned blood red with the setting sun, he took his fishing rod and walked to the riverbank, settling into his usual spot. The air was eerily still. No birds, no insects, just silence. He cast his line, the lure vanishing into blackened water. Minutes passed. Then a tug, a strong one. His pulse quickened. Whatever was on the other end was big. He tightened his grip, and began to reel it in. The line pulled hard, resisting, like something knew it was being taken and was fighting to stay below. He braced his feet and pulled harder. Then, a scream, not from him, from under the water. The sound sent a shock of ice through his veins. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a fish. It was a human voice, distorted and garbled by the river, screaming. He almost let go of the rod, almost ran, but then he saw it, a shape rising through the water, something pale breaking the surface. A face, but it wasn't looking at him. It was looking past him. Luis turned, dread curling in his stomach. A shadow stood at the water's edge, tall, motionless, featureless, just watching. The line in his hands went slack. When he looked back at the water, the face was gone. The river rippled, swallowing whatever had been there. The shadow behind him? Gone, too. Luis never fished in that river again. And on the nights he walks past it, if he listens closely, he still hears something. Not the usual sounds of the current or the wind, but the soft plunk of a fishing lure hitting the water, as if something, is still casting a line, waiting for another fool to take the bait. Story 3, The Last Cast. Raul never believed in the stories. Every year, when Lent came around, the older fishermen would refuse to go out at night, speaking in hushed tones about things that surfaced when the waters were disturbed. They come for those who don't respect the season, they said. Raul laughed at them. Fish don't care what time of year it is. So when his friends backed out of their usual late-night fishing trip, he went alone. The lake was calm, the surface smooth as glass. The moon hung low, casting an eerie silver glow over the water. Perfect conditions. He rowed his small boat out to the center, the only sound being the soft splash of his oars. Then he cast his line and waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. Nothing. Frustrated, he reeled in and prepared to try again. But as he reached for his bait, a plop, something fell into the water beside the boat. He frowned. He hadn't dropped anything. The water rippled outward, slow and deliberate. A small splash, like something had been thrown. Then, another plop, this time behind him. He turned sharply. The water was still, but something about it felt wrong. He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on his fishing. Then, a third splash. This time much closer. Raul's breath hitched. He grabbed his flashlight, shining it over the surface. At first, there was nothing, just the smooth, undisturbed water. Then, something broke the surface. A hand, white, bloated, fingers curling slowly, reaching upward. Raul's blood turned to ice. And then, from the darkness, a second hand, then a third, then dozens. They rose from the water, pale arms stretching toward the boat, clawing at the air. And then the whispers began, soft, like voices drifting up from the depths, speaking a language Raul didn't understand. His body locked in terror. Then the boat lurched, something beneath it, something massive, unseen, shifting in the blackness below. The whispers turned to a chorus of voices, some pleading, some laughing, some weeping. Then a single voice, clear as day, pulled him up. Raul dropped his fishing rod. He rowed back to shore faster than he ever had in his life, his breath ragged, his heart pounding. He didn't stop until his boat scraped against the dirt, until his feet hit solid ground. When he looked back at the lake, the water was still again. No hands, no ripples, no sound, just a silver moon reflecting off the surface, as if nothing had happened. He never fished again. And to this day, he swears, if you stand by that lake on a quiet night during Lent, you can still hear the sound of something breaking the surface. Waiting. Story 4. The One Who Waits Below. Hector had fished the same stretch of coastline for years. He knew every current, every reef, every deep pocket where the best fish could be found. The sea was his life, his livelihood. But there was one place he never went, a small, rocky inlet at the edge of the bay, where the water was deeper than it should have been. The locals called it El Hueco, the hollow. Don't fish there, the elders warned. Not during Lent. Hector had always listened, until one night, when the catch was scarce, and desperation made him reckless. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, the sea dark and restless as he rode into El Hueco. The moment he crossed into its waters, everything changed. The air felt heavier. The silence was unnatural. No wind, no distant calls of seagulls. Just an oppressive stillness. He cast his line, the bait disappearing into the black depth below. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. Then on his third cast, a pull, not the jerking struggle of a fish. Something slow, steady, dragging his line downward with an unnatural force. His grip tightened. He pulled back. The line held firm, as if caught on something. Then, a tug. Hector nearly lost his balance. Whatever was down there wasn't fighting. It was pulling. His breath came in short gasps as he reeled harder. Then the line snapped. Hector cursed, reaching for another hook, when something hit the bottom of his boat. A hollow thud, deep and resonant. His stomach clenched. He shined his flashlight over the side. The water, usually clear, was pitch black. Then a shape, rising slowly. At first, he thought it was a massive fish. But then he saw it. A face. Not human. Not entirely. Its skin was the sickly gray of something that had never felt sunlight. Its mouth was too wide. Its eyes too large. Black pits that reflected nothing. It was staring at him. Then it grinned. Hector scrambled for his oars, his fingers numb with fear. But before he could move, a hand broke the surface. Long, thin fingers, webbed. It reached for the side of the boat. Then another hand. Then another. One by one, more hands emerged, pulling, clawing, grasping. The boat rocked violently. The water churned with impossible movement. A voice rose from the depths, low, guttural, ancient. Stay. Hector didn't think. He grabbed his knife and slashed wildly at the hands. A horrible screech tore through the air as something let go. The boat lurched backward as if released. He rowed with everything he had, his arms burning, the shore feeling impossibly far away. The voices followed him. Stay, stay, stay. Only when he reached land did the whispers stop. Only then did he dare to look back. The water was still again, but just beneath the surface. He swore he saw it. Watching, waiting. Hector never went near El Hueco again, and no one who has ever fished there